Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The second to last episode of the Clone Wars feels quite different from the rest of the series. There's less dialogue than usual, the music is more serious and ethereal, the pacing is also a lot slower, and the entire 20 or so minute episode covers just one important event, Order 66, from the viewpoint of Ahsoka Tano. One of the most impactful moments in the Clone Wars series, and I really can't wait to see how it ends next week. It also made me remember just how much potential the Clone Wars TV series had. I've always preferred it to Rebels and Resistance, and it's truly sad that this saga is about to end. Now, we do learn a little bit more information about Order 66 from the Jedi perspective. While Anakin is on his way to further investigate the Supreme Chancellor, the Jedi Order are having their own discussion about the war. Mace Windu has premonitions that there will be a plot to destroy the Jedi, and he also senses the dark side surrounding the Chancellor. No one was really able to sense Darth Sidious before, and that was because he was exceptionally skilled at masking his presence in the Force. It's possible that he was now purposely showing himself off in the Force in order to goad the Jedi into attacking him. Mace Windu is definitely one of the more aggressive council members, and he's sort of playing right into the hands of Palpatine. But Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, a more cautious and starchy member of the council, proposes an alternative situation. Obi-Wan Kenobi has just engaged General Grievous. If he can defeat the cyborg general, the Separatist leadership would most likely collapse, ending the war. Ki-Adi-Mundi suggests that if by that point Supreme Chancellor Palpatine still has not given up his emergency powers, then they could try to remove him from his position. This actually brings up an interesting scenario. What if the Jedi weren't blinded by their hate of the dark side, and instead of rushing foolishly headfirst into Palpatine's office, Mace Windu was stopped and the Jedi attempted to do exactly what Ki-Adi-Mundi talked about. Turn the Senate and the populace against Palpatine because of his refusal to let go of his power. Well, the first hurdle in this situation is the Grand Master himself. Yoda usually doesn't give much input during these Jedi Council meetings. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a great impact in the Council. Everyone basically defers to him on every decision because he's almost a millennia old and supremely wise. But towards the end of the Clone Wars, it seems like Yoda has slowly begun to withdraw from the rest of the Jedi, and it's almost like he's preparing himself for what's to come. We've talked about Yoda's strange behavior prior to Order 66 before in previous videos. You see, months before the Battle of Coruscant, Yoda had been contacted by Qui-Gon Jinn from the Spirit Realm. This led him on a crazy spiritual mission to discover how to become one with the Force. During his journey, Yoda actually has this really intense vision where he witnesses the rise of Darth Sidious and the fall of the Jedi Order at the hands of the Clone Army. Several Jedi actually had similar visions about Order 66 in this time period. Sifo Dyas did, which drove him to order the Clone Army. Count Dooku did also, which drove him to leave the Jedi, and Pon Krell did as well, which drove him to betray the clones. Yoda was a wise Jedi, and he was wary of prophecies because they oftentimes misled the individuals who received them. But Yoda was one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order, and therefore his visions were a lot clearer than most. He also had been selected by Qui-Gon Jinn, who now was one with the Cosmic Force, and had great insight on what was going to happen in the galaxy. Qui-Gon Jinn already knew what was going to happen in the future, and he also knew about Yoda's path to becoming one with the Force. This was a very painful path, one that would require Yoda to do nothing while watching all of his Jedi companions be sacrificed. Yoda understood that Darth Sidious had the Jedi Order in checkmate, knew that the clone troopers would eventually become their enemy, and if the Jedi attacked the clones or refused to fight in the war anymore, they could also be labeled as traitors, which would result in Order 66 anyway. As would any Jedi move against the democratically elected Supreme Chancellor. Yoda realized that all of his Jedi already had blasters pointed at their backs, and there was nothing he could really do. This is why I believe he remained so quiet and introspective throughout the last year of the Clone Wars. He was preparing himself for his own coming trial so that he could survive and train a new generation of Jedi sometime in the future. Yoda basically had given up on this current generation of Jedi, but what if Ki-Adi-Mundi's plan had gone through? What if the Jedi tried to secretly move against Chancellor Palpatine behind his back? What if when Anakin tells Mace Windu about the Chancellor's dark side powers, Mace Windu lets calmer voices prevail and doesn't head straight to the Chancellor's office? Well, first of all, the Battle of Utapu would have ended before Order 66 ever happened. With General Grievous dead and the Separatist Council on the run and hiding on Mustafar, the central Separatist command structure was completely destroyed. This means that all of the pockets of resistance left in the Outer Rim would have become leaderless. This would result to a swift end in the Outer Rim sieges. The Yadarim sieges had stretched the Jedi Order thin and made Order 66 even easier to carry out. And so now the Jedi can basically retire from the battlefield and return to Coruscant. Most of these Yadarim siege battles should wind down within a few weeks, and the Jedi don't really need to be there as that's happening. Most importantly, with the Separatist invasion of Kashyyyk stopped on the beaches outside of Kashiro, Grandmaster Funk Yoda can now return to the Jedi Order as well. With the Jedi Order now consolidated on Coruscant and the war about to end, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine would have to find an alternative way to trigger Order 66 and increase the threat level to the Republic so that he could justify his emergency powers. He could still stage a false flag attack against himself and blame the Jedi, but that might not necessarily be the best idea. With all of the Jedi now recalled from duty and not isolated in the Outer Rim, there potentially would be a lot more survivors in an Order 66 situation, enough to start a resistance movement of some kind. Something that Palpatine probably wanted to avoid. His Order 66 plan had basically been the result of 1,000 years of Sith Lords in exile carefully planning in the shadows. The Jedi at this point will have reached out to friendly senators such as Bail Organa, Padme Amidala, and Mon Mothma. There was already a coalition in the Senate that was wary of the Supreme Chancellor's tremendous power. The Jedi rarely stepped into the political limelight in the post-Ruusan Reformation era, but when they did, they were usually taken very seriously and respected. Although exposing themselves in the political arena where Palpatine dominated could also be dangerous and lead to Order 66 anyway. Palpatine could interpret the Jedi's move in the Senate as an attempt to overthrow him still, so the Jedi will have to bring a very strong case with them. Now that they have knowledge about Palpatine's true identity, they'll have to re-examine everything Palpatine has done up until this point. In this alternative timeline, Master Shaak Ti all of a sudden becomes one of the more important Jedi in the Order. As the Jedi supervisor for the Kaminoan cloning facility, she was responsible for overseeing the battlefield incident involving clone trooper Tubbs. Tubbs basically went into a trance in the middle of a battle and shot his Jedi general in the back of the head. This most likely was caused by a chip that was later found implanted in his head and was also found in the heads of all of the other clones. One of Tubbs' close friends, Clone Trooper 5s, did his own parallel investigation on the chips in their heads and concluded that someone had programmed Tubb to execute the Jedi. He obviously blamed the Separatists first, which probably would have been my choice as well if I were him. Shaak Ti ultimately gets tricked into bringing 5s directly to Chancellor Palpatine. She has no idea that the Chancellor is the one behind all of these chips and what their true purpose is. She's just told by the Kaminoans that they're designed to limit their aggression within clones. Shaak Ti sits on the High Jedi Council, and now after learning that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, she'll probably want to re-examine what exactly happened to Tubbs and then also 5s. Using their own medical facilities, which was originally what the Jedi wanted to do during the incident, the Jedi could find a clone and isolate his brain chip and find out exactly what the real purpose is behind this chip, along with the hidden contingency orders of the Republic. You see, Order 66 was just one of 150 different orders that the clones had inside their heads. There were also other orders like Order 65, which stated the following. In the event of either a majority in the Senate declaring the Supreme Commander to be unfit to issue orders, or the Security Council declaring him or her to be unfit to issue orders, and an authenticated order being received by the JAR, commanders shall be authorized to detain the Supreme Commander with lethal force if necessary, and command of the JAR shall fall to the acting Chancellor until a successor is appointed or alternative authority identified as outlined in Section 6. Order 65 would be the perfect weapon to eliminate Chancellor Palpatine and also keep casualties to a minimum. All the Jedi needed to do now was convince the Security Council to issue Order 65. The Jedi's allies in the Senate would have to convince the Council that such actions were necessary. They could point towards Palpatine's increasing executive powers, the massive increase in budget and size of the federal military, along with the nationalization of the intergalactic banking clans. When the war ends, their arguments just become even more valid. I mean, no one really wants a large, overbearing federal government in the Republic. The beauty of using Order 65 is that the military would be responsible for the coup under orders by the Senate. This is how the Republic should work. The Jedi were technically not a part of the government. They were kind of this weird quasi-religious and military organization. They had pledged their loyalty to the Senate and the Republic, but they definitely weren't a part of the political process, and they definitely weren't elected. The Jedi also had a code that prevented them from ruling the galaxy and also getting heavily involved in politics. Interestingly enough, there's actually nothing in the Jedi Code that says they have to hunt down and exterminate the Sith, but for some reason, individuals like Mace Windu believe that it was his mission in life. 4 years of war greatly changed the Jedi. It turned them into soldiers and warriors. The Jedi had become more aggressive and more battlefield goal-oriented, but a lot of Jedi seem to be missing the larger picture of what's going on in the galaxy. And who's to blame? It's hard to concentrate when you have blaster bolts flying at your face. Now, Darth Sidious was definitely a mad genius, but the fact that the entire Jedi Order was unable to see his plans coming shows us just how blind the Jedi had become. 1,000 years of peace made the Jedi arrogant and far too complacent.